The young recruit stepped onto the mat, her heart hammering in her chest, her palms slick with sweat, and her legs trembling from a mix of fear and anticipation she had trained for months waking. Before dawn, running until her lungs burned lifting. Waits until her muscles screamed, but nothing could have prepared her for the raw intensity of this moment. The room smelled of sweat and rubber, and something sharper like iron or fear. The other trainees stood in lines, their faces tight, with concentration and tension, eyes darting to the instructor as he moved silently around them, assessing each one of them as if he could see their inner weaknesses and their hidden strengths. The young recruit tried to steady her breathing to focus on the drills she had memorized for hours, but the moment she felt the instructor's eyes on her, the world shrank to the mat beneath her. And the figure looming over her, the SEAL, moved closer, his presence overwhelming like a storm about to break. He circled her, slowly testing her reactions. Her body stiffened, but her mind raced. Calculating angles and possibilities, she remembered the words her mentor had whispered before she left. Remember who I am, they echoed through her mind like a lifeline. In the dark water threatening to pull her under, the instructor suddenly struck, grabbing her from behind, his hands wrapping around her throat, cutting off her air. Panic surged through her veins and a scream clawed at her throat, but no sound emerged. Her arms thrashed instinctively, trying to break free, every muscle burning, every joint aching, but the pressure was relentless, like iron bands crushing her ribs. Her vision blurred, and she felt herself tipping into darkness. Her mind flashed with memories of home, of her family, of the people who believed in her, and the dream she had fought so hard to pursue. She realized that survival was not just about strength, it was about resolve, about refusing to let fear claim her, even when the body begged for surrender. She twisted, wriggled, striking backward with every ounce of power she had trained into her body, but the instructor adjusted easily. His grip unyielding like a shadow that could not be shaken. The other recruits watched frozen, unsure if she could survive, unsure if anyone could survive the force that held her in its grip. She felt herself slipping as the world darkened on the edges, but the spark inside her flared hotter than pain, hotter than terror. Remembering who I am, she thought, remembering every insult, every doubt, every moment she had been told she could not and would not, and she would show them all that she could and would. Her fingers clawed at the instructor's arms, searching for leverage. Her legs drove against the mat in a desperate attempt to flip the balance. The mat creaked under her weight, and the shuffle of bodies was like thunder in the silence of her focus. She felt the first small shift, her hips twisting slightly, a chance to slip. One hand free, one elbow to jab backward, her breath rasped in her chest, and her heartbeat roared in her ears. Her mind was a whirl of technique and survival. She recalled every lesson, every move, every training drill that had burned into her muscle. Memory in the early hours of the morning, and now she used them all at once. She ducked her head under the crushing grip, rolling with the momentum, striking a knee to the side and a fist to the shoulder, and something gave. Her body lurched forward, the pressure on her throat loosening just a fraction, enough to taste air, enough to ignite hope, enough to fight. She fought with a ferocity she did not know she possessed, a storm of movement, spinning, twisting, striking, until finally, with a scream that tore from the depths of her soul, the hold broke for an instant, but it was not yet over. The instructor staggered back, but his eyes were calm and deadly, assessing her with a predator's calculation. He moved again, faster this time, and she realized that this was more than a test of strength, it was a test of spirit. It was a crucible designed to strip away fear and leave only the raw essence of who she was and what she was capable of. Her lungs burned, her vision swam, and her muscles screamed. But she refused to give in. She remembered the mantra again, remember who I am, and the words felt like fire in her veins, filling her with an unyielding defiance. The other trainees were silent, watching the battle unfold on the mat. They felt a mixture Of awe and fear of disbelief that one human being could fight with such relentless determination, the instructor struck again. His hands like iron against her body, but she moved with precision, with calculation, with desperation, and every movement. Was a lifeline a promise to herself that she would not surrender, that she would endure no matter the cost? She felt sweat stinging her eyes, burning. Her skin, her muscles trembling with exhaustion, but she tapped into reserves she did not know existed. The room seemed to shrink around her, every sound amplified, every movement magnified. She could hear the instructor's breath, feel the shift of his weight. The subtle cues that betrayed his next move. She twisted again, ducked again, struck again, and the battle continued, not as a contest of brute force, but as a test of wills, a duel between the fear that sought to consume her and the identity she clung to so desperately. Remember who I am, she thought again and again, and it became a shield. It became a weapon. It became the rhythm of her survival. The mat beneath her became sacred ground, the sweat and pain a baptism of fire, and she refused to fall to the darkness that threatened to claim her. She refused to let the pressure break her spirit. Every second stretched like hours. Every heartbeat thundered in her ears, and every breath was a victory. Her mind sharpened to the point of clarity, calculating angles, predicting moves, sensing the flow of power and momentum. Her training, all the years of discipline and sacrifice, converged in a single, unbroken chain of determination. She would not fail, not now, not ever even. If every fiber of her being screamed to submit, the instructor pressed harder, but she met force with force, strategy with strategy, technique with technique, and the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable collapse or miraculous escape. And in that moment, she realized that this was not just about surviving the hold. It was about understanding herself, about claiming her own identity, about refusing to allow anyone to erase the essence of who she was. Every strike, every twist, every roll became a declaration, a proof that she could endure, she could fight. She could exist without compromise. She remembered who she was, and it burned through her exhaustion, through her panic, through the searing pain, and for the first time she felt a surge of control. A small opening, a glimpse of freedom, and she moved with everything she had left. Just as her strength threatened to fade and darkness crept at the edges of her vision, a massive figure slammed onto the mat, breaking the hold in half, and the world seemed to shatter and reassemble in a single heartbeat. The Navy SEAL had arrived. His presence a force of calm authority that seemed to push the fear back from her mind. He pulled her up, steadying her as her knees threatened to buckle beneath her, the weight of exhaustion and adrenaline colliding in her chest. Her lungs drank deeply of air, and for the first time in what felt like hours, she could feel her body flooding with life again. She gasped and coughed, tasting metal and sweat and triumph all at once. The other trainees stood frozen, watching the intervention, a mixture of awe, fear, and disbelief etched on their faces. They had seen the impossible, and it had arrived in the form of a human being who could bend the chaos of the moment into control. The SEAL leaned close and whispered the same words that had ignited the spark within her, "Remember who I am." And it was as if those words were a key unlocking something deep inside her, something primal and unyielding. Her heartbeat slowed just enough for clarity to return, and she realized that survival had never been solely about brute strength or technical skill. It had always been about identity, courage, and refusal to surrender. She felt the weight of every doubt, every insult, every moment she had been told she could not accomplish anything pressing against her spine, and yet she stood taller because she had endured. She felt the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, but now it was tempered with clarity and understanding. The SEAL released his grip and stepped back, his eyes scanning the room, ensuring every trainee understood that this was both a victory and a lesson. She wiped sweat from her brow and looked around at the faces of her peers, some of them still paralyzed with fear, others shaking with the effort of holding their own composure. She saw respect and astonishment in their eyes, and she understood that she had changed not just physically, but in the unspoken language of strength and survival. She flexed her muscles, feeling the ache and burn, and she welcomed it because it was proof that she had pushed past every limit she had once believed defined her. The seal nodded once and turned away, leaving her standing in the center of the mat, a figure who had confronted terror and emerged. Not just intact, but transformed. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes and letting the rush of experience settle into her bones, letting it become part of who she was. She remembered again, "Remember who I am," and it was no longer a whisper, but a roar inside her mind, a declaration that she belonged to herself fully and unconditionally. The room remained silent for a moment, as if time itself had paused to acknowledge what had just occurred. The other trainees began to move, some cautiously, some with newfound energy, but all with an awareness that something extraordinary had transpired. They had witnessed a human being confront the absolute limit of pain and fear and still claim victory over circumstance.